Hey everyone, Warwick's here. So Guardian Druid got some updates. Finally, they were acknowledged by Blizzard. And today what we're going to do is we're going to look it over together. I've already done a lot of digging and research on this, so this is not going to be like a first look type situation, but kind of wanted to go over and talk about my feelings on all of the changes. For those of you that are not aware, that are watching WoW videos for me, I'm maining Druid in Dragonflight. It'll be a feral main for raid purposes, but pretty strong chance I'll be doing a lot of tanking in Mythic Plus to help out my raid teams. Both of the raid teams that the iconic community that I raid with will be forging forward with in Dragonflight. So what I want to do first is start right here with the blue post. Goes over all of the changes and stuff like that, but we're going to focus strictly on this set right here. So the Guardian Tree has undergone changes to its node connections and talent positions. Scintillating Moonlight, Twin Moonfire, and Galactic Guardian are after the 20-point gates. They got moved down. Survival of the Fittest after the Wildfire, Guardian of a Loon Choice Node, and Soul of the Forest are now after the 8-point gate. So they basically swapped those places. Dream of Cenarius has been split out of its choice node with Ursoc's Fury. Okay. Maul damage has been increased by 40%, so a huge buff to Maul. Mangle damage has been increased by 15%, which is not insignificant because the 4-piece bonus that you'll be getting with Vault of the Incarnates does make Mangle cleave onto multiple targets when it's used with a Gore proc, so 15% across the board for all three of those is not a bad buff at all. I don't know if it fixes the fundamental damage problems, but it's there. Twin Moonfire damage bonus was nerfed from 20 to 10%. I expected that to happen. Moonfire was doing 50 to 60% of our damage in both AoE and in single target situations, so it was going to get nerfed. Blizzard doesn't really like, for the most part, one ability being a massive part unless there's an inherent design with it, like Arcane Mage, where Arcane Blast is going to be the prominent amount of your damage, just because of the way the spec's designed. They don't see Guardian that way, so they nerf Moonfire. Guardian of a Loon, Mangle now increases the duration of your next Iron Fur by 3 seconds, up from 2. And then after the Wildfire, had the healing from this ability increased by 50%. So not a lot of changes. These are very kind of minor stuff overall. Obviously, people are going to look at the tree changes and then these three right here, the Maul and Mangle buffs and the Twin Moonfire nerf. Like it's Twin Moonfire nerf. I expected that. I think that's fine. And then we're going to go from there. So what does this look like in the Guardian tree itself? So I've got the tree up. Wahud updated the calculators not long after these changes were announced. The Druid class tree still hasn't been touched, still has the 3-point nodes across the board in it. And from a kind of raid perspective, this is kind of what I see the tree looking like. Just because I think this is going to end up being the best. For Mythic Plus, you'll probably trade out Innervate for Skull Bash, so you can have your Interrupt. Potential that you trade out Minute Roar for something like Typhoon or Hibernate, depending on needs of the dungeon. And there's even a possibility that Well-Honed Instinct comes out to grab the other of Typhoon or Hibernate, whichever you did not get with the Minute Roar. Alright, so the top of the tree hasn't really changed at all. So the first 6 points, really the first 9 points are all the same. Top of the tree hasn't changed. They did add connections here between Infected Wounds and Ursoc's Endurance, as well as Ursine Adept coming straight down into Berserk now. So that's still there. Improved Survival Instincts is still around to give SI a second charge, which I've said before I think is a major problem. And this is where the changes start to come in. So you notice Survival of the Fittest and After the Wildfire, Guardian of a Loon, and Soul of the Forest. They basically took these three and moved them down. Soul of the Forest got split off from Blood Frenzy and moved up. And then they just took this triangle and basically flipped it and moved it down here to where Scintillating Moonlight, Galactic Guardian, and Twin Moonfire are down here on the bottom right side of the tree now. The other thing they did is they moved Vulnerable Flush, swapped it with Tooth and Claw. Now Tooth and Claw is listed as a 2-point talent here. There is a prevailing thought amongst the Guardian community that Tooth and Claw as a 2-point talent node is a bug, and this is going to actually be changed to 1 point because it was 1 point as it is currently on live servers and in all other previous beta builds. If this was not changed to be 1 point, then yeah, because like if you look at it, like the second point doesn't change anything. So that's why the prevailing theory is that it's going to be changed from 2 to 1 point, and it kind of matches up with the rest of this row. So we think it's just a bug. Hopefully that's the case. Now, so here's the thing. We want the Moonfire talents. Of course, you're going to grab Flashing Claws for additional thrash. It's just a straight damage increase. But we got to get down this right side of the tree. Survival of the Fittest, I think, is a talent that has always been niche, and I think it's always a little bit overinflated at 2 points for a 33% cooldown. I just think that it's, or 30% cooldown. I just think it's too much. And the talent that it connects to after the wildfire also just doesn't feel really all that good. As well as Guardian of Elune. Guardian of Elune was a Torghast talent that I think saw some play there, but after the wildfire just is group healing for spending 200 rage, which can't, like, I have to think about it, but like that's what, 5 Iron Furs? So every 5 Iron Furs, essentially, you're going to heal people for 150% of your AP. May not be a bad talent for group healing type situations, and with some of the broader changes going on with health pools and damage pools of enemy, or damage components of enemies in Mythic Plus dungeons, something like After the Wildfire could see some value, but I just really doubt it. Soul of the Forest, Reinforced Fur. Soul of the Forest moved up here. Of course, Mango generates 5 more rage and deals more damage. Then, of course, you have Tooth and Claw, Vicious Cycle still where it's at, and Earth Warden. Now, they did add connections from Front of the Pack to Fury of Nature, Vicious Cycle to Berserk with the Haste, Soul of the Forest to this particular set of Berserk, going from there. So, this section of the tree I'm not too thrilled about. And there's a few reasons why that is. First off, assuming this isn't a bug, this needs to be reverted back to 1 point to align with the rest of the tree. Just doesn't make sense. Vulnerable Flesh still being mandatory to take in order to get, if you want to go the Tooth and Claw Mangle, probably more single target style build, you still have to take Vulnerable Flesh, which is just a 2 points for 30% extra crit chance on your Maul. Like, this talent is boring, uninteresting, uninventive, and needs to just go right here with Vicious Cycle. Now, if this were Vicious Cycle at 2 points, or Tooth and Claw at 2 points, and then Vicious Cycle below it at 1 point, then this becomes much more interesting to me, especially since Vicious Cycle has intricacies with Mangle. You can definitely do that. Maul is going to be one of those talents that, as long as the ability only hits one target, it's going to be incredibly niche. If there were a talent somewhere down in here, say Vulnerable Flesh, extra crit chance, and it allows it to cleave off of, say, 2 other targets. Then all of a sudden, you now have an AoE damage spender that, if you wanted to go, like, if you used it just on the regular, it's just a straight damage dump. But if you used it with a Tooth and Claw proc, now all of a sudden you're getting that, 15% DR. You can double it to 30, whatever the case may be, on 2 points. Then all of a sudden you're getting that DR on multiple targets, and Maul becomes worth using in a AoE situation on Tooth and Claw procs, which opens up the tree for some potential variations in how you play the build. But as it is right now, with Maul only hitting a single target, it basically kills a portion of this tree. And I just don't think that that's very wise. The other thing is that you're kind of now forced into taking layered main in most Mythic Plus builds. A low chance to apply 2 stacks and a low chance to not get a charge of Frenzied Regeneration, which, with the amount of self-sustain in the kit, I don't see myself panicking over not having Frenzied Regen, because there's a lot of passive healing from arcane damage. There's, you have Renewal on a on-demand 30% heal. You have your healer, of course, doing some healing. And then, of course, you have your Frenzied Regen on 2 charges. And you can take a talent like this, where during that time you're getting 20% increased healing. So, like, it's just, the 10% chance to not consume a charge just doesn't feel impactful. If you want to make this talent very useful, add the old Azurite agility trait component back to it, where you get like 500 agility when it applies 2 stacks. So even though that way you can keep it as a low stack, but when you get that dice roll, you're benefited both defensively and offensively from it. I think if they did this, it would open up some really nice pathing options in the tree and make layered main feel like it's a valuable 2 points to spend. Now, for Mythic Plus builds, you still have to come down here and grab this. So you're either grabbing Front of the Pack or Reinforced Fur. You're going to grab Reinforced Fur because it's just simply more useful overall. in the tree itself because you're getting the additional iron fur armor, and it's just going to be there. Of course, you're going to take Fury of Nature. You're going to take this Berserk talent because you want to get down to the side of the tree. And then for the other points that you spend, you're looking at something like Earth Warden, this Berserk talent. You can maybe go Soul of the Forest once you get 4-piece to go with that, or you could grab Vicious Cycle. I'm going to go with Soul of the Forest for now because I'm assuming eventually you're going to get 4-piece. You could also go for the utility and front of the pack. And then you have to, at the very least, grab these 2 nodes because they are so important to this build. And then you're grabbing all of these talents right here. So that leaves you with 5 points. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can go about spending these last 5 points. You could grab something like Blood Frenzy, which I think should be way up here in the tree. Like, it should probably be, like, right here in the tree itself. I think it's so vitally important to balance to Guardian Druid. And then you just move Galactic Guardian over to this tree and put Dream of Cenarius back into the choice node with Ursoc's Fury. Or just, make Dream of Cenarius Reinvigoration. Because, again, Frenzied Regen cooldown doesn't matter that much. But if you get a chance to have an instant regrowth castable in all forms for 30 seconds afterwards, like, that's just even more sustain that you could potentially get in the tree. All right, this could be at 4 points left. So now we have some options. You can go spend 4 points to go grab Reinvigoration into Ursoc's Fury into Rend and Tear, which means you don't get Rage of the Sleeper or Incarnation. You can also grab Incarn and Ursoc's Guidance, which gives you 2 points left to spend, which means you would only be able to get like Reinvigoration, or you may be able to get Rage of the Sleeper, and then you pick another talent through here, like maybe the second charge of ISI, or you could grab 2 points into Survival of the Fittest, whatever the case may be. I'm going to say that this path with Incarn, Rage of the Sleeper, and then a point into either Blood Frenzy for more Rage generation, just to allow for more Iron Furs, or the second charge of ISI, kind of depends on the week. But I'm going to grab this build here. So what this essentially means, and even then, you could even take like this portion of the Berserk cooldown and remove it and go get something like the second charge of ISI if you need to be much more defensive. So what are my problems with this tree? My problems really lie in, of course, the middle of the tree we kind of already talked about, but my biggest issue with this tree is that Fury of Nature, strictly arcane damage. Elun's Favored, strictly arcane damage. Yet the talents that they most impact, they don't connect to under any form or circumstance. Now, if you did something like take these 2 talents and put Elun's Favored here, and move Fury of Nature here, put Scintillating Moonlight down to 1 point, move it here, which means you'd have to move Berserk here, and then you'd move Blood Frenzy here, then I think all of a sudden now you have some really nice build paths. Because then you could choose, okay, do I get a powerful 3-minute cooldown that generates a ton of rage, and then also really lean into that 3-minute cooldown through things like Ursoc's Fury and Rend and Tear? Or could I go like 90-second bear, probably a little less than that with Ursoc's Guidance, and lean heavily into Moonfire? Like, all of a sudden then you have some options. So while these changes I think overall are a decent step, I think there were just many big whiffs here that Blizzard made, and there were hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of pages of feedback on Guardian Druid on the beta forums. I made a thread called Guardian Druids Deserve Better that was framed largely off of Ryshott's Shadow Priest Deserve Better post, and that's gotten over, I think at the time that I'm recording this, it has about 100 replies. There's a number of threads that talk about, like, what are you doing with Guardian Druid? Guardian Druid, Guardian Druid. It's been one of the most talked about things in the Druid community, period. Like, obviously, Boomkins are focused on Boomkin things because they're one-minded and only think about Moonkin things. But, like, Feral Druids are pretty happy right now. Like, there's some small things that they would like to see change. But for the most part, I've seen Feral Druids advocate more for Guardian changes than I have seen them advocate for their own changes. And the same goes for Resto. Resto's concerned about the nerfs that they're getting, because they feel like they're going to drop out of the healing meta. But I mean, Resto Druid is Resto Druid. It's going to be strong. But the rest of the druids that aren't like flustered by the changes resto are getting are also advocating for guardian druid. Like it's been guardian druid is for like the first time in a long time been the subject of conversation amongst the druid community mostly. And the fact that like this is a spec that has gotten an intense amount of focus from both the druid community, a lot of the folks that I talk to on my WoW community and Iconic, or we talk in the Titan Forge podcast Discord when Guardian Druid comes up. Like there's a ton of people that are like, man, Guardian Druid just really needs help. And so there's like a lot of people that were like waiting on these changes and hoping that they would do something to hit a home run. And they hit like an infield single, to use baseball terms. I think there was a lot of just obvious things that are whiffed on. Vulnerable Flesh needs to do something else other than give you crit strike chance. This is, I think, the perfect place to put in Maul also cleaves, to where all of a sudden now this build has value in cleave raid fights, single target raid with Tooth and Claw, and it has really good value in Mythic Plus, to where you make the choice between like a layered main Maul build that kind of leans into maybe these sides of the trees, where you take out these points here. Maybe you take away Blood Frenzy, all of a sudden you got 3 points to spend. You can grab something like Reinvigoration, Ursoc's Fury, and then you're getting that shield on Maul and Thrash. Or you can choose to drop these 3 points in Flashing Claws in Earth Warden and come down here and grab Ursoc's Fury, Pulverize, or like Dream of Scenaria, something along those lines. Like all of a sudden there's some potential build diversity that's happening. And right now there really isn't any build diversity. I think this is the spec that for the most part you're going to be forced into. There is a chance in Mythic Plus or in raid situations, instead of you go this route with it. But then you still need to grab Layered Main and Soul of the Forest, where you do something like this. But then you also are dropping these 3 points, of course, because you don't need them. You grab something like that to grab like the 2 defensive cooldowns, or you can put this last point into something like, Stampeding front of the pack if you need it, or you can go grab the second charge of Survival Instincts, Vicious Cycle, or put a point in Flashing Claws just to give you a little bit of damage boost there. Like it kind of depends on your comfort. The other thing that needs to happen is Rage of the Sleeper needs to have a larger reflect amount. Instead of small amount, it needs to be like medium amount. Because in combination, like if you wanted to go like Rage of the Sleeper into Bark Skin, like you should be able to have strong reflect damage, which I think is going to be important in Mythic Plus, maybe not as much in Raid. But all of a sudden now you have Bark Skin, which you can cycle through as a defensive offensive cooldown with Brambles, improve Bark Skin. Yeah, you get Verdant Heart, which increases the healing that you get. You get the increased duration, you get the little absorb shield. You have that going, and then you can cycle Bark Skin into a Rage of the Sleeper, which gives you a little bit of reflect damage in that, and then you cycle that into Incarnation, which gives you, of course, 3 target mangle, maximum health boost, gives you all the berserk benefits, so the increased haste, the reduced costs, the no cooldown thrash or mangle, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, like, I think you have a really interesting playstyle, but Rage of the Sleeper kind of needs a boost. I like it for the 25% DR because I tend to be a little bit more safe and passive in my builds, but until I really get comfortable with content and then I start stripping away defenses and adding offense, that's kind of like my plan in Dragonflight. But right now, Rage of the Sleeper, I think could be something that you could use in both situations for both a strong defensive need, but also a good offensive need if the Reflect did a little bit more damage. Because right now it's not doing a lot. I think it's less than 1%. So I'd like to see that as a capstone talent be increased so that it feels like a true capstone talent. Because like the 25% DR, immune to CC effects, like those are cool. Those are fine. But, I want to see Bear as a spec that is notoriously damage starved, get a little bit of source of damage. Even if it's passive, you're still having to hit in time Rage of the Sleeper in order to maximize the reflect that you're getting. And because you're taking 25% less damage during its duration, like your reflect amount is going to be after that DR is calculated. So your reflect back is 25% less powerful than what it is, which is why I think they need to buff the reflect, whatever amount that it does back, reflect the percentage back, make it 25% of all damage that you take is reflected back at nature damage, something like that. All of a sudden, Rage of the Sleeper is a very interesting talent. Something else that I'd maybe like to see them do with the Guardian Druid tree is just make Moonfire the single most important talent build. So you take these, and then you drop these 3 talents here. So you could put like Galactic Guardian here, or you could put Scintillating Moonlight, make it a 1.4% DR, put it here, Galactic Guardian, and then like Twin Moonfire, then Galactic Guardian. Then you do like Convoke, Incarn, Rage of the Sleeper, Ursoc's Guidance, something like that, just because I think the Moonfire build is very mandatory, which on the sad side makes things like Ursoc's Fury and Rendon Terror, which I think are the most interesting talents in this cluster, dead. They're dead in the water because there's just no way to effectively get over to them, get the Moonfire talents, and also make your cooldown actually feel worth using. Which brings me to kind of like my last point. Berserk needs to be reevaluated in a heavy way. The cooldown itself just doesn't feel impactful. It's 3 minutes, which is a very long cooldown. And overall, like, it's just not good. It just doesn't feel like the difference between Berserk and Incarn is way too stark. When you think of other specs that have like stuff that affects their cooldown, think Syzygy for balanced druids on celestial alignment. Like, there's very distinct reasons to use something like, Pulsar versus Syzygy. Like, I think there's some really cool potential in those talent builds. Obviously, right now, Syzygy is like kind of cracked right now, but that's a different video. But like, just something needs to be done with Berserk to make it feel like it's valuable. And like, even right now, Wowhead doesn't even give it its own name. Like, that's just how sad it is. It's probably just a tooltip database error, but it is what it is. The other thing that I really hate is that you're investing 7 points into Moonfire. So you have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Some of these could either be reduced or some of the effects could be combined. So like Fury of Nature and Elune's Favored could probably be combined. And all of a sudden now you can move something like Galactic Guardian here, and then Scintillating Moonlight into Twin Moonfire. It's like the capstone, or make Galactic Guardian the capstone, whatever the case may be. Like, combine these talents that shaves, a point off the tree. You make this a 1 point talent, shaves another point off the tree. All of a sudden that's 2 more points to get something like Improved ISI, or grab both talents and Flashing Claws, or grab like a Vicious Cycle for a more raid oriented build. This tree still feels like it has a little bit of bloat to it for reasons that are still unbeknownst to me. So, overall, I think the steps they've made were a net positive, but they felt very scared to make the changes that I think that needed to be made. And I don't know if it's because we're, now 3 weeks out from Dragonflight being released to everyone, and they don't want to impact it too much. Like, the majority of the changes I want to see are probably not going to happen until 10.1, which is a shame. But I think it's because they wanted to kind of play it with a softer hand because they are only 3 weeks from release, or 4 weeks, I guess now. It is November 2nd, so 26 days out from release. So a little under 4 weeks from release as I record. So maybe they didn't do anything like overhaul it like they've done some other trees during the beta cycle or alpha cycles, but I still think there was room to just address a few simple concerns. Something quality of life, like Innervate, you add it to Ursine Adept. Like, why isn't this in the game yet, Blizzard? It is like the easiest QOL change that you can make, and for some reason it hasn't been done. Why? It's infuriating. Like, that's not even adding like whole new talents to the game. That's literally asking for a actively tanking druid that wants to help his healer can't, because it's like, oh, if I cast Innervate on you, I die, so that mana that I'm giving you is useless because I'm dead. Like, that's not logical. It's not rational. Unfortunately, the class tree, like I said at the beginning of the video, hasn't changed. I'm probably going to run something similar to this for raids, probably drop Innervate, maybe Minute Roar for Skull Bash, maybe a second point of Well-Honed Instincts, but like, this tree doesn't feel very rewarding either. It's very cookie cutter. Every tree basically is going down, for Feral Druid, you want the extra range, so you got to spend, at least 3 points over here to get this. Resto Druid, you want the utility of Hibernate and Typhoon and Ursol, so you have to come down this side of the tree in order to get it. Bear, like, frankly, you're going to get the best value out of the increased range. And a Mythic Plus, Ursol's Vortex, so you have to come down this side of the tree. And Moonkins are basically sticking to this side of the tree. Like, this side of the tree is so heavy compared to the other one that, like, this tree is all sorts of out of balance and out of whack. And the fact that they are just seemingly satisfied with it is incomprehensibly dumb to me. Like, I know people are like, oh, I really like this tree. Like, even giving us 3 extra points to take away Nurturing Instincts, Killer Instincts, and Lakara's Teaching stat to 2 points. Like, with 3 extra points in this build, what do? I grab Well-Honed Instincts, I can grab Innervate, and grab Nature's Vigil. Mythic Plus, I maybe grab Hibernate or Typhoon. Maybe grab Skull Bash for, like, raid builds where you need to interrupt. Think Anduin where you need to interrupt mobs, stuff like that. Like, just taking these 3-point talents and making them 2, I think opens up a lot of options for druids on this tree, even though I still don't really like the pathing of the tree. But just something simple like that, which for some reason hasn't been done. And I don't get why. That said, what do I think about Guardian Druid overall as I played around with it a little bit on pre-patch with only the 60 talent points what we got with level 60 talents versus what we're going to get with level 70, and kind of what I've messed around a little bit with on beta. Guardian Druid still functions. It's going to be able to do the content that a majority of people are going to want to do. Is it going to be the world first tank? No. Is it going to be the meta tank in Mythic Plus for MDI, TGP, anything like that? No. Is it even going to be a spec that you see like in the top 100 of Raider IO's rankings? Probably not. But for 99.5% of us, you're going to be able to do the content that you want playing Guardian Druid, which is true right now in Shadowlands and is going to be true in Dragonflight. Like, for me, I'm looking to do 20s because I want the max level vault, and my goal is to get 2k on every spec, so I'm going to be pushing at least 15s on this character, which are going to be easily doable, and I want to be able to push, getting as high as maybe 2500 on, at least Guardian, maybe even Feral as well. So am I going to be able to do that? Yes, I absolutely believe that I can do that. Is it going to be easier to do it on like Prout Warrior or Demon Hunter or something like that? Yes. But if you are an avid Bear fan or an avid Druid fan and you don't want to reroll another class, like, this tank is going to be functional. It's got some, I think, engaging gameplay with the Moonfire build and the proc-based gameplay that adds just a lot of depth. When I say depth, it adds more than just thrash spam for 30 seconds once every 3 minutes. It adds some nice little gameplay to the spec that desperately needs more gameplay. And it's got, a decent cooldown, a short cooldown in Bark Skin that does a lot for you now. Has a good long cooldown in Survival Instincts. It's got good self-sustain through the Moonfire healing, as well as an on-demand off GCD heal and renewal. So, like, it's got the tools that it needs to get there. It's really, I think, just mostly a matter of tuning, and just some of these talent stuff just needs to change to make the spec overall feel like it has an opportunity to have powerful gameplay loops that advanced users can take advantage of that maybe beginners don't, but it doesn't define the spec. Like, I've talked about this before too, where like Guardian Druid doesn't, like, the difference between a new Guardian Druid and a great Guardian Druid, it's kind of hard to tell. Whereas a new Prot Warrior and a powerful Prot Warrior, they are pretty much the same. Like, there's not pretty much the same. They are very, very different, sorry. And you can very much tell the difference. So I just want to be able to have that for Guardian Druid as well. Anyways, guys, that's my thoughts on Guardian Druid. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I appreciate you sticking around with me for the nearly half hour that we've been on this now. So until the next video, all, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're all enjoying yourselves. You're having fun gaming, and I'll see you all in the next video.